you to take the part as a buyer or seller in a market. It's very similar to what happens on the commodities exchange when they're, if you've ever seen Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd in Trading Places, you saw that scene with frozen concentrated orange juice. It's something like that. So you're going to be given a little ticket here, which means that you have either a buy or sell order from someone else. Someone in a remote area that you don't know wants you to either buy, what are we buying or selling? Coco Futures. That'll be fun to explain it. So I've experimented with different things over the years, and there's a reason why I think Coco Futures might be the one I stick with. But Coco Futures is the thing instead of widgets or something completely random. I did link it up to an actual thing, but it doesn't really matter what you're buying or selling, and it doesn't really, if you're selling, it's not like you have something that might go bad, right? You don't have to sell unless you can sell for a high price. So if you're selling, try to sell for a high price. Of course, if you're buying, try to sell for a low price. The profit that you make will be the difference between what price is on your ticket and the price that you agree to with another player. Now the other player, the other students in the room, they won't know they know whether you're buying or selling, but they don't know what price you have any more than you'll know what price they have. So assume that they can, if they are the buyer and you're the seller, assume they can pay a lot more than what they're offering. And of course, most of us have a lot of experience buying, so we know how to drive down the price. There's a reason why I wanted to, if it sounds like I'm biased towards coaching the sellers, it's true. I used to, like in a situation like this, have half the class be sellers and half the class be buyers. And then your grade was based upon how well they did. If the sellers made more profit than the buyers, then the sellers would win. If the buyers made more profit than the sellers, then the buyers would win. It turns out that was a terribly unfair thing to do. And I used to explain this after running the experiment, and then I thought, you know what, I'm going to start explaining it before the experiment. So I don't know whether you're going to get the buyer or the seller ticket, but if you get a seller ticket, you're probably going to lose. Statistically speaking, they've done this hundreds of times, right? Thousands of students, and the sellers usually end up short. I don't know exactly why that is, and I invite you to consider various hypotheses, or maybe offer one as an explanation. But here's the scenario. George, you mind if we designate? Okay, so let's say that you have to buy, and as long as you buy for less than $100, then any amount you pay less than $100 is profit to you. Okay, so if you buy for $90, you get $10 profit, but if you buy for $80, you get 20, exactly. And I'll be the seller. And let's say that I have to sell for more than $10. So if I sell for $10, how much money do I make? How much profit? Nothing. In order for me to make $10 profit, how much do I have to sell it? 20. And if knowing that, right? If I just gave everybody that scenario, you're a buyer, you have $100, try to buy as low as possible. All the sellers, you got to sell for more than $10, right? If I did that with everybody, well, where would you think the price would come in? Where do you think that eventually the middle price would be?
50.
Yeah, maybe 50. At 50 would be fine, right? Except that 50 means that how much profit do I make? Only $40 profit. And how much profit do you make?
60.
Well, 50. 50. Yeah, you get the idea. You make $50 profit. I only get $40 profit, which would mean if we're just comparing straight profit, well, you won and I lost. So even though it sounds like we ought to meet in the middle, it tends that we don't meet in the middle. We meet on the seller's side of the middle. We generally, for whatever reason, do that. Is there any way that I could fix that, make the design different, change it up? Well, maybe. You got any ideas? You see what I'm saying, right? It seems a little unfair, though, to base your grade on it. Say, you just by luck of the draw, you ended up being a seller, so you get less points than the person by luck of the draw who got to be a buyer. Doesn't that seem unfair? Even though on its face, it sounds like it's totally fair. Anyone have any idea why, in this experiment, sellers usually end up short? you think that maybe, I got a couple of hypotheses. Anyone want to try one? All right. Yes.
Maybe it's like we have more experience being buyers than we do being sellers.
Yes.
So when someone says all you need to do is make more than $10, saying, "Oh, I'll sell for $100, so I'll make 9 times profit," you sound like you're a jerk.
Well, really, that's two issues there, right? One, experience. We all, maybe all of you have selling experience. I have a lot of selling experience, but I've definitely bought more stuff than I've sold. Even a person with a lot of selling experience has more experience buying rather than selling. Okay, so that's part of it. And I dare say, there's a second point there too that you're saying, if you have $100 and you get a price of 50, you're like, all right, 50-50. I gave half to them, half to me. But if you have a selling price of 10 and you sell it for 50, you feel like a 400% profit. It feels like a bigger percentage profit. That was your second point. So one is like a 50% profit, and the other one is a 400% profit. You with me? So if I instead wanted to even it out, I might compare not the dollar amount of gain or profit, but instead do a percentage gain, kind of a total amount of percentage out of the available, which would then skew the calculation to the seller's way. And the buyer would have to get a pretty good deal in order to just have an equal amount. What's your idea?
I was kind of just thinking of the typical car salesman scenario, where usually the buyer haggles with this seller to get a better deal for the car or whatever they're buying.
Yes.
And usually the buyer gets their way in the sale, and the salesman has to lower the price they're trying to sell the car at, and the buyer goes away with the deal they wanted to get, or a deal that's closer to what they wanted to get, instead of the seller getting closer to what they wanted to get.
So we have experience haggling as a buyer, and the seller may have, in your particular example, I would say that a person who's making a living selling cars has an advantage in the experience. They sell cars every day, all day long, and the other person who's buying has less experience with the buying car. And there's all sorts of different methods that can be used to the advantage of the seller. But it's selling is tough work, but your basic idea, whether aside from the fact that buying a car, the essence of what you're saying, I think, has a lot of merit. That the negotiation power for the buyer and the seller is not always even. The seller is kind of like, I gotta make the sale, and the buyer is, I can go someplace else. Right? Where the seller says, I need you to stay here and buy from me. And psychologically, that's kind of tough. Also, I think is it true to say that a lot of our buying or a lot of our selling experiences have been uncomfortable in many times? Like, I hear things like this. Well, yeah, I sold some stuff. I just wanted to get rid of it. Right? In other words, immediately before, regardless of what value the buyer thought your stuff was worth, you thought what you were selling was not good. How many of you enjoy the salary negotiation part of your job? Your annual piece when you're selling your labor, and you go in and you're like, yeah. I would imagine that for most of you, if you're like most Americans, they report a low expectation. It's stressful, and they in an unpleasant way. Of course, I like that kind of stuff. I don't mind negotiating for other people. In fact, I like it so much. But you can imagine that's not the normal thing. And then you always feel like did I do it? You with me with the sales thing? If you think about the times you've sold, you haven't enjoyed it that much. And you think about the times you've bought, you have enjoyed it. You get this consumer surplus. Remember what was consumer surplus? Did you run across that in your vocabulary words? I thought you did. What's consumer surplus? By the way, while you're looking, yes, Vincent.
Is that like disposable income?
No, disposable income is like, you know, the amount of money that you have discretionary dollars outside of, after taxes and necessities, right? So, not a bad guess though. Tell you what, I'll give you the thing. Thank you for trying. Now, if I hand you a card today, and I have cards for everybody, or sometimes a little piece of paper, put your name on it, and then write down on it what it is that you did to move the conversation along. If I gave you a card, then I must think that's something good. If I've already given you a card, I won't give you a second card, I'll just say add it to that card. Then at the end of the day, at the end of tonight, you will have made not only your $40,000 for the day, is that how much I'm giving you each day? I think so. $40,000 for the night, plus thousands of dollars for everything that you did to contribute. Did anyone, for instance, bring in a Wall Street Journal article today? And we got a Wall Street Journal article for the day? Okay, so that would be a no. See the list that I gave you about what we're talking about next week? And the week after that, and the week after that? You find something in the Wall Street Journal that you're interested in, and then figure out what principle of economics that matches up to, and bring it in that night that it's that it's scheduled. You can do it every night and make extra money every night. You with me? That would help. You'd show me that you're thinking about what that we're doing and thinking ahead and reading the Wall Street Journal, and all those things are good things, and so I'm incentivizing you with the extra dollars. Plus, by you bringing it in and sharing it with the class, and you don't have to stand up in front of anybody. I mean, if you do, you'll make extra money, but what I would expect you to do is hand me the Wall Street Journal article that you found on the night that we're talking about it, with a one paragraph tying it in with a particular topic of the night. And then I'll just put it on the projector. We'll look at it for 30 seconds or something like that, and we'll say, oh yeah, good, that's true. Yeah, it does apply to the real world. And we'll get back on it and we'll make some extra dough. All sorts of things. Did I give you a list of things you can do to make some extra dollars? Good. Well, all right. So many of you are doing it, and I brought enough cards for everybody, so we'll proceed. Okay. So you know what to write on your paper? Good. Yep, that's right. You know what to do. Was that my writing on it? That's yours?
Yeah, it's
good. You know what to put on it? Thank you, thank you. Okay. So anyway, what we're going to do is, I think all these ideas about the experiment, it's valuable, right? You take a look at an experiment. For me, when I first designed this experiment, give one student $100 to buy with, give the other student $10 and to a minimum price. And they'll meet in the middle, and it'll just be interesting. And I'll reward the winners with a lot of money and with a high grade. And the losers will have to do like an extra assignment or something like that. That's the way I used to do it. And call them winners and losers. What a terrible thing to do. So, right? But I mean, it's not so bad. It's a little friendly competition. So instead, what we're doing is participate, please, in this experiment that we're doing. We're selling and buying Coco Futures. In order to increase the potential gain here, what we're going to do is I'm going to have these orders up, and why don't I show you two of them on the overhead. So again, when you're ready to trade, come on up and grab one of these sheets of paper. You're going to see that what the order is. You're either going to be a buyer representative or a seller representative at that moment. And you're going to hunt around for another student who's on the other side of the trading fence, if you will. You're going to negotiate with them. If you don't like their offers, move away. Say no. Because that's a big part of this thing too. If you don't shop around, you're not going to get a very good deal, right? My mama told me that. You better shop around. Okay, so when you shop around, then you're going to get a good feel for the market. You'll see what the tolerance is. Remember, they don't make any money unless they get a deal with you. You don't make any money if you make a deal with them. If you don't like the deal, if you're not making enough profit, walk away. Go somewhere else. All negotiations are like that. Accept, reject, or counteroffer. Okay? This is a speedy thing, though, right? You're going to run out of time, so if it doesn't seem to be progressing very long, that's all right. Go away. You taught them a lesson that they're dilly-dallying too long. Okay? As soon as you have met someone that you have a meeting of the minds with, confirm that you're both not the same thing. I hate it when two buyers both agree, yeah, I'll pay you $1,000 for your Coco Futures. And like, oh yeah, I'll pay you. And then they realize they're both sellers and they're not actually negotiating on two sides of the fence. But when you've done that, a buyer and a seller have agreed upon a price, come on up here, hand in your 2 tickets, tell me what price that you've agreed on, grab a new ticket, and get back out there and make another trade. That's all there is to it, okay? And I'll be keeping a running tally of what's going on. I'll show you what the what's going on here. So here's an example. There's a seller right there, seller W. I'm going to zoom in. All right. So if you were to get this one, you'd see that you were a seller. That you're a seller of Coco Futures. You have to sell for more than $63, and you have to make as much profit as you can. And because you wouldn't want to show that all over the place, you would just fold that paper up there, and you'd walk around so people would know that you were selling. You're like, all right, got Coco Futures, selling Coco Futures at 85, stuff like that. Just it should be a nice, noisy, active, like, you know, get a blood pumping kind of market, okay? Okay? Meanwhile, let's find a buyer here. So there's a buyer order. You're a buyer of Coco Futures. You have $88. Don't pay more than this. Everyone's got a different card, different price points, everything else. It creates a demand curve and a supply curve when you put them all together. But you are just an individual player who's trying to pay less than 88. So you hear somebody walk around, oh, I have Coco Futures 85, and you're like, get Coco Futures, I'll buy that for 20. And they're like, get out of here.
Are they all Coco Futures?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's the market for Coco Futures. The market
What
for
is
Coco.
Coco Futures?
Yeah, great. I'm crazy for Coco Futures. Okay, so Coco. So I should back up a little bit because you're like, why is he using Coco Futures? Could be anything. How do you pick that? I used to do apples in the fall and roses for this time of year. Valentine's Day, yes. So, but the sellers kept losing. And I thought, I know why they're losing, because they think they're going to sell their apples or they're going to rot. Or the roses are going to be no good. You know, they got to sell the roses. I've picked perishable items. That was my hypothesis. So I switched to diamonds. Right? I thought, they don't go bad. They last like a long time. What's the commercial? A long, long time. Diamonds are for a long, long time. Isn't that how the word?
Or forever.
Thank you. Thank you. Where's my little pad of paper?
Don't let him suffer. It's
Good.
hilarious.
Yep. Some people would say, don't humor him. That's right. Diamonds are forever, right? That's your point. So
Wait, what do I do with this?
you put your name on it, and then you write diamonds are forever. And then when I'm going through, then for tonight, I'll go, oh yeah, nice. And I'll instead of giving you only 40 grand for tonight, I'll give you the 41 or 42 grand, something like that. I'll give you like an extra 1,000 or 2,000 each. There's no end in sight. Like you could pass the class tonight if you got involved enough.
You don't be
Hypothetically.
that person, though.
Yeah, right. I gotta give you that. Exactly. Excellent question about the Coco Futures. See, you don't just get it for answering, you get it for asking, just moving the conversation together. It's much more fun. Much better when you participate. Better for all of us. So I went with diamonds, and then I went with like oil, petroleum. But what I noticed is like good salespeople would be saying like, oh, these diamonds are better than the other diamonds. There's some kind of differentiation and things like that. And it also didn't make any sense because I kept the dollars amount, so you have diamonds to sell, $88. It just didn't make any sense. So I just practiced it. Sellers kept losing. And then I decided to go to Coco Futures because I thought it was abstract enough. But cocoa is a commodity. A commodity is a perfectly competitive market where there's so many sellers and so many buyers, and there's no differentiation between they're all selling and buying the same product. That's what makes it a commodity. Frozen concentrated orange juice, corn, petroleum, coffee beans, certain spices, yeah, the pork bellies, soybeans, stuff like that. They're all commodities. Okay, so this is I'm glad you asked because I think this is very fascinating. So you have a bunch of growers of cocoa. It's an agricultural product. There's growers all over the world. And they're good at growing, but they're not very good at risk taking. I mean, there's certain risks of being a farmer automatically, but imagine what it's like to be a farmer where you don't know what you're going to be able to sell your cocoa for come harvest time. And this is the beginning of the season. You're trying to decide how many acres of cocoa to plant and how many acres to dedicate to some other use. How many workers should you hire? How much should you spend extra on the various cultivation methods? If someone is selling, some extra farmland, should you buy it and cultivate it into cocoa? Is the price of cocoa going to be high enough to warrant your extra expenses? Well, you don't know any of the answers to those questions, because on the day you harvest, you're going to sell your cocoa beans for whatever the market for cocoa beans is. If it's high, great for you. If it's low, bad for you. And weirdly enough, in years when the cocoa harvest is really high, you'd say, that's great, you're getting so many cocoa beans. You say, well, it's yes and no. I have a lot of cocoa beans, but I got to sell them for a low price because everyone's got a lot of cocoa beans. Plus, I got to hire more workers and spend more diesel. I had to spend a lot more money to harvest all the cocoa beans. When I got in the market, I had to sell them for such a low price per ton that I actually made less money in profit on the year that I had a good crop, because everyone had a good crop. If there was only a way for me to have a good crop and everyone else to have a bad crop, that would be best, because then the price would be high and I could sell a lot of it. But it's hard being a farmer. They're on one side of the market for cocoa beans. And the other side of the market for cocoa beans is Hershey, Cadbury, Nestle, Reese's. You get the idea, right? Swiss Miss. Not sure who owns Swiss Miss. But they are also not sure what the price of cocoa beans is going to be. But they do know that they have tons and tons of product to produce every year, and what they would like is a set price for cocoa that they could count on and not worry about whether they're going to lose all their profit margin production, or they're going to, worse yet, miss out on the supply of cocoa beans and not be able to produce something that they really need to produce and let it default to something else. So they want guarantees of production, and they want a guarantee of price. And if they knew they were going to get the cocoa beans and they knew what price they were going to have to pay, then they could plan everything else. They wouldn't have to worry about that. So that is they're on the buy side. And so they're not very good at taking risk on the agricultural cocoa bean market. Commodities exchange is what it's called. And the sellers, the farmers, are not really good at taking the risk there either. So enter you, the risk takers. You are the ones that are good at calculating how risky it is and who and how many, and it's an economic function. And what you do is you say, I'm willing to take the risk, and you're willing to lose fortunes and make fortunes and guarantee the farmers a guaranteed price for a certain amount of production. And you're willing to guarantee the buyers of cocoa beans a guaranteed price for a certain level of production. And so these cocoa futures are contracts. Let's just make it one unit of cocoa futures might be a ton of cocoa beans, okay? So you say to the growers, I guarantee, it'll be easier if we use numbers, okay? We'll pick a number like, let's say $75, all right? So everybody kind of thinks that the price of a ton of cocoa beans is going to be $75. It seems to be the market price, $75. Everyone has that number? Okay. There's very much what we're talking about today with supply and demand. The suppliers, the demand, everything else kind of works out to $75 per ton. However, we know that it might be as much as $80 or as little as $70. There's a range in there. We don't know whether $75 is really the price. And that makes that difference of whether I'm going to have to, this is Nestle over here, whether we have to pay $80 a ton or $70 a ton is a big difference to us. We'd kind of like to lock it in. And if we can lock it in at $76, no risk of fault, we can plan around that. Everything else we can go from there. We know we can get all the cocoa we need for 76. So we're willing to sign a contract that says we guarantee paying 76 per ton for 1 million tons. The farmer has also said, I probably can sell it for 75, but I really don't. And if it turns out I can only sell it for 70 when market comes, I'm gonna be broke. if I know I'm expecting to sell for 75, but if someone guaranteed paying me 74.50, I would sell all my crop, and I would say I can deliver to you 40 tons, my whole crop, for 74.50. I know that I might be losing 50 cents, but hey, if the market goes down and everyone else has to sell their cocoa beans for $70, I still get to sell mine for $74.50 because I have a contract that they promised to pay me $74.50 for 40 tons. Now, if I want to plant 45 tons or 50 tons and make more cocoa and sell some of my production, I can sell at the market. But the 40 tons that I've promised, I'm going to deliver at the price that I promised on the day it is promised. And they'll have to pay me the price that they promised because we have a contract. And now, me as a farmer, I don't have to worry about the price of cocoa beans. I can just do what I do best, farm. And Nestle, we don't have to worry about the price of cocoa beans either. We can just do what we do best, make delicious chocolate. And who does have to worry about the price of cocoa beans? The person who's voluntarily entered into taking risk. The person like yourself who never touches a cocoa bean, has never been inside the factory, and doesn't really quite know what a cocoa future is. But they understand that if they can buy something for $74.50 and sell it for $76, and they do it 1,000,000 times, then they'll make $1.5 million today. It's quite the explanation of in futures contract, commodities. I mean, think about all the stuff that you got there. Did you have any questions? Anyone with any questions?
Is this stuff?
More in futures there is. Have you ever seen the Trading Places with Dan Aykroyd? It's a movie. It's like 28 years old. Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, very funny movie, and at its heart is all economics, and decisions and stuff like that. But they go into the commodities exchange in the World Trade Center, actually, in a key climactic scene in the movie. And so there are certain things that there's a future market on, but not tomatoes. Maybe tomato paste. Never seen that, but something like that. So they see frozen concentrated orange juice as not like you would buy in the store. That's differentiated. Donald Duck versus Minute Maid versus Sunkist. Those are not frozen concentrated orange juice futures or commodity. Those are what we would call monopolistically competitive because they're all frozen concentrated orange juice, but they're all differentiated. Frozen concentrated orange juice that I'm talking about is when you buy like a ton of the stuff, and you're buying it, you buy the truckload, or you're buying it by like a tanker full of frozen concentrated orange juice, and you're saying, okay, now we're buying that. How much is it per unit? And it's the same wherever it came from. It doesn't matter whether the oranges were squeezed from Mexico or South Africa or from Florida or California or anything else. It's just the same, exact same everything. So to whatever degree you can do that, usually whenever there's something that's bought in large quantities that's undifferentiated, there's usually a futures contract possibility.
Is the term called fungible?
Fungible, yeah.
Fungible?
So fungible really refers to anything that can easily be used in any, can easily be repurposed for something else. So if something is fungible, then it can be repurposed, like dollars. I was going to give you, hey, here's some money. I'd like you to go and buy some groceries for me. And you go, okay, no problem, and you head on out, you're going to buy some groceries for me, and then you come back and you brought groceries back. And I'm like, I didn't know you were getting groceries. Like, yeah, I got the groceries. So I quickly call you up and I say, you know that money? Use it for something else. And money is fungible, so it's easily done. Other things are not easily done. So if you take a look at your budget at work, you might find that there are certain dollars that are in a particular category, and you're like, why don't we just take the dollars out of there and use it for the party, And you're like, you can't use that, that's non-fungible. That can only be here. You're like, gotta use it for that. Thus the waste and the frustration. Have you used home heating oil at your house? You use it, like, I don't know how you heat your house. When you got an oil truck shows up and delivers oil to your house, okay? So you have a furnace that burns oil instead of, I guess the rest of you are burning natural gas, coal, wood. just use an electric plug-in. You have no idea where the heat's coming from. You're not up to you. Right. Right. I mean, geothermal. That's right.
Oh, right.
Got a little of that going on. Okay, so often the oil man will offer a deal. They'll say, the price of oil fluctuates just like the price of gasoline. If you'd like to, at the beginning of the season, you can make a contract where they say they're going to deliver over the course of the year or winter, let's say 1,000 gallons of home heating oil, and they'll keep you topped off and everything, but you can prepay and at let's say the current price. So if the current price, let's just make it $2, you would give them $2,000 at the beginning of the winter, then they promise to deliver 1,000 gallons, and they don't charge anything more. And then you go, okay, that's good, now I can plan, it's easy. Now, of course, if the price of home heating oil goes down, you'll wish that you had waited and just bought it for a price that's low. And they'll be glad that they got the money from you early, because they don't have to sell you that oil they're delivering at a lower price. They sold it to you for $2 a piece, $2 a gallon. Of course, if the price goes up, then you're happy and they're eating the loss. So it's a risk on both sides. You can imagine that a middleman could jump in there and say, I guarantee a certain price to the oil man. I'll pay the oil man, let's just say, $1.95 per gallon for all their oil. And I'll charge the customer $2.05, a guaranteed price of $2.05, and I'll make a dime on every gallon of oil, and I don't ever have to go to their house, touch an oil spigot, don't even know what petroleum is, not even in the same state. I'm just taking the risk, but I'm able to, buy at $1.95, sell at $2.05 for some level because I got the guarantee. So and then I'm taking the risk. Okay. Middleman, brokers, all that kind of thing. Good, all good stuff. Ready? Okay. So this is the way we're going to do it.